You've made it through the day, however it looked, busy, quiet, heavy, or light. It's behind you now. You've arrived in a space where nothing more is asked of you. There's nothing to plan, fix, or figure out. This moment doesn't need anything from you. You can let your shoulders drop, let your breath slow down, let yourself just be here. Right now, you don't have to prove anything to anyone. You're not being measured. No one is waiting on your next move. This time is for you. Not to achieve or improve, but to simply rest, to let the thoughts ease off, to let the noise soften, to notice what it feels like to slow down. You may be carrying the weight of things that didn't go the way you hoped, or thoughts you wish would quiet themselves. That's okay. You don't have to push those things away. Just let them be in the background, like distant sounds that no longer need your attention. You're not alone with them. You're here now, and that's enough. Somewhere in all the movement of the world, there have always been people who paused, who sat quietly with their own thoughts, who didn't rush to fix every feeling. Tonight, you're doing the same. You're stepping into a slower rhythm, one that doesn't demand, but gently offers space. If you're tired, you're allowed to be. If you're unsettled, that's all right too. This is a space where you can stop holding it all together. There's nothing you have to carry right now. Let that be your starting point. Settle in, breathe, let things fall away one by one. You've done enough for today. Now it's time to rest. Most people spend their lives chasing a sense of control. They want the weather to be better, the traffic to move faster, the people around them to act more kindly, or more predictably. They wish the world would bend a little more easily to their hopes and preferences, but it rarely does. And that's where so much tension begins. The Stoics understood this. They knew that the world will always be what it is, full of events we didn't plan for, responses we didn't expect, and outcomes we can't always shape. Epictetus, one of the clearest voices in Stoic thought, said it plainly. Some things are up to us, and some things are not. This wasn't a resignation. It was a quiet invitation to focus only on the things we truly have the power to change. Not the weather, not the news, not what others say or do, but something closer and more reliable, our own mind, our own choices, our own response to what happens. There's a kind of peace that begins to settle when we stop trying to control the uncontrollable, when we stop resisting what is and start noticing that we still have choices, always. The world may bring difficulty, delay, or discomfort, but inside we are free to choose how we meet it, calmly or with agitation, open or closed, grasping or letting go. This idea might feel too simple at first, almost too small, but it's where freedom begins. Because if we believe peace only comes when the world cooperates, we'll always be waiting. And if we tie our sense of calm to everything outside us, then calm will always be just out of reach. But if we recognize that our thoughts are within our care, that our reactions, beliefs, and expectations can be shaped, then peace becomes something we can find here, now. That doesn't mean we won't feel frustration, or sadness, or fear. The Stoics never denied emotion, but they trusted that how we carry those emotions, that's where our power lies. We don't choose what the world throws at us, but we do choose how long we hold on to it. We choose whether we build a home for bitterness, or let it pass, whether we ruminate or release. And most of all, we choose the tone of the voice we use inside our own mind. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. Let yourself drift a little closer to stillness. The Stoics didn't need silence around them to be calm. They practiced finding quiet inside. Even in the middle of noise, even under pressure, they turned inward. They reminded themselves, my peace doesn't depend on outcomes. It doesn't come from other people's words. It doesn't come from everything going the way I want. It comes from how I choose to see what's in front of me. Marcus Aurelius, an emperor surrounded by war, duty, and endless pressure, wrote to himself in his private journal, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." These weren't lofty ideas to him. They were reminders, soft, personal nudges to stay grounded, to return again and again to what's in his control, and to let go of the rest. It's a lesson that doesn't require mastery, only practice. The next time something doesn't go your way, a late reply, a closed door, a plan that changes, you can pause, just pause, and remind yourself, this is outside my control. But what I think, how I feel, how I respond, that is mine. That is where I live. That is where I rest. Over time, this becomes less of a rule and more of a rhythm. You stop clenching your thoughts around things that won't change. You stop replaying scenes you can't rewrite, and instead, you start giving more attention to your inner world, what you're telling yourself, how you're holding each moment. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. The world will move, whether you grip it or not. But your mind, that's something you can tend to. That's a space you can soften. Sometimes peace comes not from solving, but from seeing clearly, from realizing that the world isn't broken. It's just never been ours to command. But the mind is always waiting for us to return, to be shaped, to be soothed. The Stoics didn't aim for control over life. They aimed for mastery over the self. And that mastery wasn't harsh or rigid. It was gentle. It meant recognizing when to speak and when to stay silent, when to act and when to be still, when to let thoughts run wild, and when to step back and ask, is this helping me rest? Is this thought kind or useful or true? And when it wasn't, they let it go. Not with force, but with care, like setting something down that's too heavy to carry into the night. That's something you can do now too. Whatever thought is pressing at you, whatever fear or tension is tugging at your rest, it doesn't need to be solved tonight. You're allowed to set it down. You're allowed to rest, even while the world remains imperfect. Because peace isn't the absence of problems. It's the presence of a calm, steady mind. And that mind is built not through control, but through attention, through gently returning to what is yours and releasing what is not. You are not the noise of the world. You are not the swirl of changing events or other people's judgments. You are the quiet center that gets to choose how to respond. And tonight, you can choose to rest. Not because everything is perfect, but because your peace doesn't depend on that. The world can wait. For now, you're here, and that's more than enough. In the Stoic view, action and virtue were deeply connected. But that didn't mean constant motion. It didn't mean never stopping. To the Stoics, rest was not a betrayal of purpose. It was part of it. True rest, the kind that restores and clears the mind, wasn't seen as laziness. It was seen as a necessary return to one's inner balance, a way to continue living with reason, compassion, and clarity. Marcus Aurelius, often burdened with the weight of ruling an empire, reminded himself often that retreating into one's own soul was not a withdrawal, but a kind of maintenance. He wrote, "People try to get away from it all, but you can't get away from yourself. Nowhere you can go is more peaceful, more free of interruptions than your own soul." In those words, there is no guilt in resting. There is only the quiet acknowledgement that a mind strained by constant doing becomes less useful, less steady, and less kind. Rest, then, is not the opposite of virtue. It is what allows virtue to grow. Without rest, even the most thoughtful person becomes reactive. Even the most compassionate soul can grow impatient. The Stoics weren't chasing exhaustion. They didn't believe that to be virtuous was to be constantly striving, constantly busy. They believed that wisdom required space, that reason needed silence to speak, that a life of principle needed moments of quiet without pressure or urgency. Sometimes people think they need to earn rest, that only after everything is complete, after every task is crossed off, is it okay to stop. But the Stoics saw things differently. They saw rest as something that prepares us to live better, to see more clearly, to act with more kindness. They knew that a tired mind is easily led by impulse, but a rested one can choose more freely, more gently. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. There is a kind of strength in knowing when to pause. It isn't weakness, it isn't failure, it's a moment of return. To step back and ask, am I being who I want to be right now? Am I thinking with care? Am I acting from understanding or from weariness? To stop and breathe, to lie down and let your mind loosen its grip. That, too, is part of a virtuous life. Because a clear mind is not something we stumble into by chance. It's something we care for. Like a garden, it needs tending. And sometimes tending looks like doing nothing, like letting stillness unfold, like not solving, not planning, not preparing, just allowing space. Epictetus reminded his students not to confuse idleness with stillness. He taught that a person committed to virtue isn't always in motion. Sometimes their greatest work happens in silence, in reflecting, in releasing, in choosing not to act on every urge. And to do that, they need rest. Rest is not indulgence. It is not something separate from your purpose. It is part of how you return to it. Just as muscles need to recover to grow stronger, the mind needs moments of ease to return to clarity. The Stoics didn't rush through life. They tried to move with awareness, with intention, and they saw that rest was what allowed them to keep that awareness alive. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. You've done what you could, and now you're allowed to stop. Not as a reward, but as a return to yourself, to your breath, to a steadier, kinder rhythm. It's okay if you're tired. It's okay if your thoughts are scattered. What matters now is that you're here, and that you're beginning to let yourself settle, not out of escape, not out of avoidance, but because you know that rest prepares you to come back stronger, gentler, wiser. A Stoic rests not because they've given up, but because they know what matters. And they protect it. They guard their energy. They guard their peace. They know the difference between stillness and apathy, between calm and carelessness. There is no shame in stopping, no guilt in being quiet. If anything, there is deep strength in it. Because to rest wisely is to understand that the self needs care, and that care isn't weakness. It's part of the discipline. It's part of being ready for the next moment. Ready not to react, but to choose. So tonight, let go of the idea that resting means doing nothing. Let go of the voice that says you need to keep pushing. Let go of the belief that calm must be earned. It doesn't. It only needs to be chosen. This moment right now can be part of your path, not a pause in your life, but a part of it. The Stoics didn't see life as a race to be run. They saw it as a series of choices, each one a chance to move closer to reason, to patience, to peace. And sometimes the wisest choice is simply to rest, to be quiet, to feel your body soften, your breath slow, your mind open just a little more. That isn't idleness, that's care, that's wisdom, that's virtue in its quietest form. So much of what weighs on the mind each day was never ours to carry in the first place. Worries about what others think, guilt over choices we didn't make, frustration at things we couldn't control. These burdens, quiet and invisible, add up. They settle in the body like tension in the chest, or behind the eyes, or in the restless pacing of the thoughts that won't quite settle. The Stoics understood this deeply. They saw how easily people get tangled in things that don't belong to them, emotions that aren't theirs, responsibilities that were never asked of them, expectations they never agreed to meet. At the heart of Stoic peace is a kind of gentle sorting, a reminder to step back and ask, is this truly mine? Epictetus said, do not seek to have events happen as you want them to, but instead want them to happen as they do, and your life will go well. That isn't about giving up. It's about recognizing the difference between what we can change and what we can't. And so much of what stirs our minds, other people's moods, the shifting world, outcomes that depend on countless moving parts, was never really within our grasp. We can care, we can hope, but we don't have to carry what isn't ours. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. There's relief in remembering that, in knowing that not every tension is yours to solve. Not every burden on your shoulders belongs there. Sometimes you've just grown used to holding things that were handed to you out of habit. Other people's problems, situations that were never within your power to fix. The Stoics would gently invite you to set them down. They wouldn't ask you to be cold. Stoicism was never about shutting down. It was about facing life clearly, without exaggeration, without fear, without confusion. And when we see clearly, we realize that much of what unsettles us isn't about us at all. It's what someone else is going through. It's what someone else expects. It's what the world is doing on its own rhythm. When we stop trying to carry it all, something softens. The breath slows. The chest loosens. The thoughts don't fight so hard to keep up. And in that space, we begin to feel what's actually ours, the thoughts that arise from our own values, the actions we can take, the calm we can create within. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. If something doesn't belong to you, if it's not part of your choices, your character, your purpose, it's safe to let it go. You're not walking away from your life, you're walking back into it, lighter. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself not to take on the troubles of others unless they asked for help, and he had the strength to give it. He wasn't being selfish. He was protecting the clarity of his mind, so that when the time came to act with compassion, he could do so cleanly, without resentment, without exhaustion. He wrote, "If it's not right, don't do it. If it's not true, don't say it." And just as simply, you have power over your mind, not outside events. That includes the power to choose what thoughts deserve your attention, what feelings you want to sit with, what problems you are truly responsible for. You can care deeply and still choose not to carry what isn't yours. That's not neglect, that's wisdom. And it's what gives you room to care well, rather than endlessly. The Stoics didn't rush to pick up every burden. They watched. They listened. They waited to see whether something was within their sphere of influence. And if it wasn't, they stepped back. Not with harshness, but with peace. Rest comes more easily when the mind isn't overfilled, when it isn't crowded by things that don't serve it. You may be surprised how much you're holding that doesn't actually belong to you. Memories shaped by someone else's pain, pressure to live up to standards you never agreed to, the responsibility for fixing what you didn't break. It's okay to stop, to breathe, to feel what is truly yours and what is not. You can offer kindness without becoming overwhelmed. You can listen without absorbing. You can care without collapsing under the weight of the world. What's not yours is not your burden. Let that idea sit for a while. Let it clear a little space. Feel the quiet it brings. The world is full of movement and noise, but none of it needs to own you. You have a right to your own thoughts, your own rest, your own gentle distance from what doesn't serve your peace. The Stoics lived in a world as chaotic as ours, maybe more so, and still they found a way to live with steadiness, not by doing more, but by doing less of what doesn't matter, less worrying about opinions, less fixing of what can't be fixed, less holding of weight that was never theirs to begin with. You can do the same, not all at once, just one thought at a time, one breath, one small decision to let something pass by without grabbing hold, not because you don't care, but because you do, because you know that only a rested, steady mind can truly respond with virtue, with wisdom, with love. Tonight, let that be enough. Let go of what isn't yours. Let it drift. Let it rest where it belongs, outside of you, and come back to the calm that was always waiting. Sometimes we come across something that blocks our way, a problem, a delay, a person who won't meet us halfway, and without realizing it, we lean into it. We push against it in our minds, trying to make it move, trying to find a way around, through, or over. Even when we've done all we can, even when it's clearly not something within our control, we still carry it. It sits in the back of the mind, tugging at our focus, asking for energy we no longer have to give. The Stoics saw this tendency clearly. They knew how easy it is to pour ourselves into the things we cannot change, especially when those things feel personal. A silence from someone we care about, a job that hasn't worked out, a system that resists fairness. And they offered a quiet reminder: if the obstacle is not in your hands, it is not yours to move. Marcus Aurelius faced endless obstacles, wars, politics, illness, betrayal, and still he would remind himself, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke. In other words, the world may place something in front of us, but we choose how closely to stand beside it. We decide how much space it takes up in our mind. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. Sometimes the best response to a problem is not to solve it, but to leave it where it is. Not with bitterness, not with defeat, but with quiet wisdom, with the understanding that if a challenge doesn't move when we've pushed gently, then maybe it's not ours to move. At least not now, at least not alone. This isn't giving up, it's giving space. There's a difference. To give up is to turn away with frustration. To give space is to step back with calm. To say, I've done what I can. The rest is not mine. And in that moment, something loosens. The grip of urgency, the heaviness of blame, the The feeling that we must always be fixing something, that we must always be the one to make it right. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. The obstacle isn't yours if it doesn't respond to your care. If it doesn't shift when you offer patience, kindness, or effort, then you are allowed to step away. Not forever, but for now. Until the path is yours again. Until movement returns. The Stoics believed in effort, but not in struggle without purpose. They acted where they could and accepted where they couldn't. When something blocked their way and they had no power to change it, they changed themselves instead. Their attitude, their focus, their thoughts. They asked not how to move the obstacle, but how to grow around it. There is peace in that kind of shift. In realizing that energy spent pushing something immovable could be energy used to rest, to breathe, to tend to what is within reach. A small kindness, a clearer thought, a deeper breath. These are not small things. These are the building blocks of peace. And peace doesn't require the world to cooperate. It doesn't wait for every barrier to fall. It waits for you to notice that your hands are empty, and that it's okay for them to stay that way, that your worth isn't measured by how many problems you solve, that your rest doesn't need to be earned through exhaustion. The obstacle might still be there in the morning, but tonight it doesn't need your attention. It doesn't need your planning, your worry, your endless circling around it in thought. The Stoics would tell you, rest now. The mind is clearer after stillness. The path becomes visible when you stop staring at the wall and begin looking inward. Epictetus said, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." That's not a rule. It's a release. A soft exhale. A reminder that the path ahead is made not just by effort, but by understanding when effort is not needed. So much stress comes from trying to fix what is not ours. So much tension from trying to change what is not ready to change. The Stoics invite a different approach, to meet each moment as it is, to act where you can, to accept where you can't, and to know the difference, not perfectly, but gently. There will always be something you can't move. A person who won't understand, a decision made far away, a road closed without warning. These are part of life, but they do not need to be part of you. They do not need to settle inside your thoughts. You're allowed to let them be what they are, outside events. Not personal, not defining, not a reflection of your failure. Let that be enough for now. The obstacle is there, but your heart is free. Your thoughts are your own. Your rest is still available. You've done enough today, more than enough. The world can wait. The obstacle can wait. But your peace cannot. It's here, in this quiet, in this choice, to let go, to soften, to rest. Sometimes the mind holds on to moments long after they've passed. A mistake, a rejection, a change we didn't ask for. And it doesn't let them stay as simple events. It turns them over, reshapes them, gives them meaning. It calls one a failure, another an insult, another a loss. The moment becomes more than what happened. It becomes what we say it meant, what we tell ourselves it did to us. The Stoics saw this clearly. They taught that events are neutral. What gives them weight, what gives them pain or shame or fear, is not the event itself, but our judgment of it, the way we frame it, the story we tell about it. And once we understand this, we begin to see that much of our discomfort doesn't come from life, but from how we've chosen to interpret it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but your judgment about it. and it is in your power to wipe out this judgment now. That isn't a denial of hardship, it's a reminder of perspective, of how much control we still have, even when everything around us feels uncertain. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. The Stoics weren't saying that nothing ever hurts. They weren't pretending that life is always easy or fair. They were pointing to something more grounded, the gap between what happens and what we believe about what happens. That's the space where we can breathe. That's where we can decide, gently and gradually, to see things with less fear, less blame, and more understanding. You lose something you cared about. You receive bad news. Someone disappoints you. The feeling comes naturally. Sadness, frustration, anxiety. But the Stoics would ask you to pause before deciding that the event itself is bad. Because maybe, over time, that loss clears space for something better. Maybe the delay leads to something you wouldn't have considered. Maybe the disappointment reminds you to return to your own center, to rely less on approval and more on your own sense of peace. None of this makes difficulty pleasant, but it does make it less permanent, because what you feel tonight doesn't have to become a lasting story. You don't need to say, "This shouldn't have happened," or "This ruined everything." You can simply say, "This happened," and slowly let the judgment fall away. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. A quiet mind doesn't mean a mind without emotion. It means a mind that doesn't hold emotion too tightly. That lets it move. That doesn't trap it with a fixed label or story. The Stoics didn't fight their feelings. They just didn't let those feelings tell the whole truth. They looked past the first wave and waited for clarity. When something feels bad, it helps to ask, what am I adding to this moment? Am I calling it unfair? Am I calling myself a failure? Am I assuming it'll stay this way forever? Those are judgments, and they're optional. They feel automatic, but they're not inevitable. You are allowed to see pain and still keep your balance. You are allowed to feel sadness and still believe in your strength. No event is harmful in itself. It is the mind that turns it into harm. And the mind can also unmake that harm, not by erasing the past, but by reshaping how we live with it. There is peace in remembering that nothing outside you has the power to make you feel small. That even when life gives you difficulty, your inner freedom remains untouched. That your calm, your character, your values, they are always yours to return to. The Stoics didn't live easy lives. They were exiled, betrayed, surrounded by war and uncertainty. But still, they chose to find peace, not in avoiding hard moments, but in meeting them with a calm mind. A mind that knew how to separate the facts from the fear, the action from the assumption, the present from the story we build around it. If something heavy is resting in you tonight, a memory, a regret, a lingering sense of this shouldn't have happened, you can soften your grip. You can let it sit without naming it bad. You can let it pass through without giving it the power to shape you. You are not what happens to you. You are how you carry what happens. Let that truth settle in. Let it make room. Let it quiet the voice that insists this moment defines everything. It doesn't, and it never has. The Stoics didn't promise perfect peace. They simply returned to one idea again and again, that how we see an event shapes everything that follows. That if we can see it without judgment, without rushing to name it good or bad, we begin to see it as something we can live with, something we can grow from, something that passes like everything else. Tonight, the mind doesn't need to make sense of it all. It doesn't need to assign meaning or blame. It can rest. It can breathe. It can trust that not every thought needs a response, and not every feeling needs a story. You've already done enough thinking. You've carried enough for today. The rest can wait. And even the things that felt like burdens, they may not be what you thought. They may simply be moments, experiences, nothing more, and nothing you can't move through with a calm, steady breath. So rest now. You are safe in this space. The world is quiet here. Let it stay that way. The mind has a way of reaching ahead. It imagines what could go wrong, what might be lost, what could unfold in the hours or days to come. Sometimes it does this without invitation, building scenes in the quiet of night, filling in the blanks with fear or doubt. It means well. It tries to prepare. But often it prepares us for pain that never arrives, for problems that never take shape, for futures that don't exist outside the mind. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." He wasn't dismissing real pain. He had known his share. But he was pointing to the invisible weight we carry from the stories we tell ourselves. Stories that haven't happened. Stories that might never happen, and yet still tighten the breath, stir the chest, and steal our rest. The Stoics gently remind us that much of what troubles us isn't life itself. It's what we picture life becoming. A conversation we're dreading. A decision that feels uncertain. A sudden shift that might come without warning. These thoughts grow roots in the mind. They loop, they stretch, and they begin to feel real, even when they're just echoes of what might be. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. There is power in noticing when this happens. Not to stop it with force, but to soften its grip. To say quietly, this is a thought, not a truth. This is the mind imagining things, not the world declaring them. The Stoics didn't try to silence the imagination. They simply refused to let it be their guide. When something troubles you, they would ask, has it happened? Or is it something you fear will happen? And if it hasn't come to pass, why give it the same weight as something real? Why carry it through your day or into your sleep like it already belongs to you? You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. Not to the story, not to the fear. The truth is, most of what we fear isn't danger, it's discomfort. Awkward moments, hard choices, uncertainty. The Stoics accepted these things. They didn't pretend life was always smooth, but they trusted that they could handle difficulty when it came. What they refused to do was live it twice, first in the mind, then in reality. They would rather meet it once, calmly, than suffer it every hour before it arrives. There's nothing wrong with imagining. It's part of being human. But when imagination becomes a constant rehearsal for worst-case scenarios, it stops helping. It starts draining. It starts turning peace into preparation, joy into worry, and rest into resistance. It helps to pause and ask, is this happening now? Or am I trying to live through a future that hasn't arrived? The present moment is quieter than we think. It asks very little of us. A breath, a bit of stillness. A reminder that we are here, not there. Now, not later. What comes next is not ours yet, and it might be easier than we imagined. It often is. The mind is clever. It tries to protect. But sometimes protection becomes pressure. The Stoics would offer a softer path. They'd suggest trusting yourself more than your fears. They'd say, you will meet the moment when it comes, and when it comes, you will be enough for it. Worry doesn't prevent tomorrow's difficulty. It only steals today's calm. let that sink in, and then let it go. There is peace in choosing not to suffer early, not to carry pain that isn't yours yet, not to lean forward into shadows that haven't taken shape. Even if something difficult does happen, you won't meet it in this imagined way. You'll meet it with context, with new thoughts, with the support and clarity of the present moment. The imagined version is always heavier, always lonelier, always more dramatic. The real moment, when it arrives, is rarely as sharp as we feared, and we're often stronger than we expected. So tonight, if your mind drifts to what if, let it drift back. Come back to what is, to this breath, this stillness, this quiet space where nothing is being asked of you. You're not required to solve tomorrow. You're not responsible for predicting every turn. The future doesn't need you to stay up worrying. It only asks you to meet it when it comes, with rest behind you and calm beside you. You have permission to set the imagined suffering down. It was never meant to be carried. Not like this. Not now. What's here, in this moment, is gentle. Your breath, your body, your quiet awareness. And that is enough. Rest in that. And let the rest wait. So much of what weighs on us doesn't come from what we've done. It comes from what we hoped would happen after. The results we imagined. The praise we expected. The sense of completion we thought would come. And when the outcome doesn't match the effort, something inside starts to tighten. The mind replays the moment, wondering if it was worth it. It starts to question the value of the work, the conversation, the gesture. It begins to measure our actions by results we never controlled to begin with. The Stoics saw how easily this kind of thinking drains us, how it turns even sincere effort into stress, and even small delays into disappointment. So they returned again and again to a simple truth. The outcome is not your responsibility. Only the effort is. Epictetus said, "Make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens." The moment you act with intention, with care, with honesty, that's the part you own. What happens after, how people respond, what the world gives back, that belongs to something else. It doesn't reflect your worth. It doesn't measure your value. It just unfolds, the way life does. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. The Stoics didn't ask us to stop trying. They simply asked us to try without clinging, to do our part and then release it. Like breathing out after a long inhale, to give the best of ourselves and then let the world decide how to meet it. There's a kind of peace that comes when we stop expecting our actions to guarantee results. When we see that effort is not about control, it's about alignment. It's about living in a way that matches our values, regardless of what comes next. You can speak kindly, even if the other person doesn't understand. You can work hard, even if the project isn't recognized. You can try your best, even if the outcome is different than you imagined. The effort was real, and that's enough. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. When you shift your attention from the result to the action itself, something softens. The pressure lifts. The racing thoughts lose their urgency. You begin to live each moment more fully, because you're no longer chasing something beyond it. You're right here, doing what you can, and leaving the rest where it belongs, outside your control. The Stoics believed this was the path to freedom. Not freedom from effort, but freedom from attachment to how that effort is received. They knew that peace doesn't come from success. It comes from integrity, from knowing that you've lived honestly, regardless of how the story unfolds. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself often, "You have been formed by nature for the good of the whole. Do your part and be content with that." He didn't say to aim low. He said to aim clearly, to act from purpose, not reward, from character, not consequence. It's easy to confuse effort with outcome, to think something only matters if it works out the way we want. But the Stoics would say that anything done with care matters, even if no one sees, even if it's quiet, even if it doesn't change anything outside of you, because it does change something inside of you. Each time you choose effort over outcome, you loosen the grip of fear. You stop tying your peace to things that move beyond your reach. You begin to rest in the calm that comes from showing up with presence, not performance. Let go of what's not yours. Let go of the numbers, the reactions, the timing. Let go of the future you imagined, and return to the present you can shape. There is so much space here. Space to try, to care, to give, and then to rest, even before the results arrive. You are not defined by what happens next. You are defined by how you live now. That's what the Stoics trusted. That virtue, intention, and effort, those were enough. Those were complete. They were not steps toward something else. They were the something else. And you don't need to wait for the outcome to allow yourself peace. You're allowed to rest now, to breathe now, to feel good, not because everything turned out right, but because you showed up honestly. You did what you could. You lived with care. That's a good day, even if the world hasn't caught up to it yet. So rest in that. Let the outcome take care of itself. You're here. You've done enough. And that's more than enough for now. There's a quiet relief in realizing that the world does not depend on you to keep spinning. The sun will rise tomorrow, whether you plan for it or not. The tides will come and go whether you notice them or not. Seasons will shift, the sky will darken, the wind will move through trees, and none of it asks for your permission or your effort. You are a part of this movement, not its center. And that means you're allowed to rest without everything falling apart. The Stoics saw this clearly. They believed that the universe, in its vastness, had its own rhythm, that it moved with its own order, its own reason, and its own pace. Marcus Aurelius wrote often about this, reminding himself that he was one small part of a much larger whole. Nature which governs the whole will soon change all things which you see, he said, and out of their substance will make other things, and again others, from the substance of these. He wasn't saying life was meaningless. He was saying it was beyond our need to control. And that thought brought him peace. We often carry the feeling that if we don't act, respond, push, or worry, something will go wrong. That stillness is dangerous. That rest means we're falling behind. But this belief quietly overestimates our role in everything. It turns life into something we're meant to steer entirely, rather than something we move within. The Stoics didn't teach detachment from life. They taught a gentler way of being with it, of understanding that what unfolds is not always ours to direct, and that's not failure. That's simply how it is. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. The Stoics looked at nature for guidance. They saw how rivers didn't rush with anxiety, how trees didn't strain to grow, how day followed night without a single thought. And they wondered, if nature doesn't force itself, why do we? If the universe flows without our pushing, why do we tense so much trying to move everything on our own? There is a deeper kind of peace that comes when you realize you don't have to hold it all together. That the world won't fall apart if you stop for a while. That events will continue, people will keep moving, outcomes will still unfold, and your rest won't break any of it. It may even allow you to return to it all with more clarity, more calm, more perspective. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. The Stoics called this sense of universal flow the logos, the rational order of things. Not fate in the sense of fixed outcomes, but in the sense of a larger rhythm that we are part of, not separate from. They believed that when we live in harmony with this rhythm, when we stop resisting, stop forcing, stop trying to carry what isn't ours, we begin to feel less anxious. We stop trying to rearrange the stars. We simply move with them. When something happens that you didn't expect or didn't want, it helps to remember. The universe didn't make a mistake. The moment may be uncomfortable, but it's part of something much bigger than you, bigger than this hour, bigger than this year. And in that perspective, the pressure softens, the weight lifts. What felt like a personal burden begins to feel like one piece in a much wider picture. There's comfort in knowing that life has always moved this way, long before you arrived, and it will continue long after. You are not expected to hold it all. You are not expected to fix every piece. You are simply here now, in your small part of the current, and that is enough. Even when things feel out of place, the Stoics would remind themselves, all is as it should be. Not because everything feels good, but because everything belongs to something larger than what we can see. Something that includes change, loss, rest, renewal. The same way the night includes both silence and sleep. The same way winter includes both stillness and preparation for spring. And in this way, your rest tonight is not a pause from life. It is a part of life. It belongs to the same flow, to the same pattern. And resisting it only makes you tired. But accepting it, trusting it, letting yourself be still within it, that's where calm begins. Let yourself breathe a little deeper. Let your shoulders fall. Let your thoughts loosen their grip on what must happen next. The Stoics would not tell you to stop caring. They would tell you to stop believing that you must carry the world alone, that your value depends on how much you fix or how much you control. It doesn't. You matter because you are here, part of the whole, living in step with it, just as you are. So tonight, release the weight of trying to steer everything. Let go of the invisible sense that your stillness is a risk. It's not. It's a return to the rhythm you've always been part of. A rhythm that moves with or without your effort, that flows whether you struggle or rest. Let the current carry you now. You've done enough for today, and the universe will continue its quiet motion while you sleep. So much of human restlessness comes from chasing things that were never meant to stay. Possessions, praise, admiration, success, comfort, even people. We reach for them, hold on to them, try to keep them close, as if having them will settle something inside us. And for a little while, maybe it feels like it does. But then the feeling fades. The thing changes, or leaves, or no longer gives us what it used to, and we're left reaching again. The Stoics noticed this long ago. They watched how easily people get swept into the pursuit of what they cannot keep, and how that pursuit quietly fills the mind with fear. Fear of loss, fear of change, fear of not having enough. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor. Not poor in wealth, but poor in peace, poor in contentment, always feeling like something is missing. To rest, truly rest, we must see this clearly. We must ask, what am I chasing? And can I actually keep it? Not just for a year or a day, but really keep it. Unchanging, permanent, dependable. Most things in life don't fit that description. They shift, they pass, they fade, and when we try to force them to stay, we suffer. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. It's not wrong to enjoy good things. The Stoics never said to avoid love or beauty or joy, but they reminded us not to confuse having something with owning it forever, not to mistake the presence of something for a guarantee. Marcus Aurelius, who had everything the world could offer, still reminded himself daily, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. He wasn't being grim, he was being honest, and with that honesty came clarity, a deeper kind of gratitude, a sharper awareness of what actually matters. When we stop chasing what we can't keep, we begin to feel lighter. We stop clinging so tightly. We stop trying to turn moments into monuments. We let people be who they are, instead of demanding they stay exactly as we need them to be. We let ourselves breathe, without believing that peace only arrives once we've gathered enough. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. You don't need to earn your rest by collecting praise, or completing every task, or securing some final sense of success. You don't need to measure your worth by what stays, because everything is in motion. That's not failure, that's just life. And once we accept that truth, we stop running after what is always running away. The Stoics encouraged us to care about how we live, not what we gain, about how we love, not what we keep, because nothing outside of us is promised. The only thing we can truly keep is our character, our effort, our values. Those don't vanish when plans fall apart. Those don't leave when others walk away. If you've spent time trying to hold on to something that keeps slipping through your fingers, it's okay to let go now. Not with regret, not with resentment, just with understanding. With the quiet recognition that letting go is not weakness, it's wisdom. The need to chase is often born from fear, the fear that we won't be okay without this thing, this person, this status. But the Stoics believed that we are more resilient than we realize, that even when something we care about leaves, we are still whole, still capable of joy, of peace, of love, not because we're untouched by loss, but because we don't place our entire peace in the hands of what doesn't last. There's a deeper kind of rest that comes when you trust this, when you stop chasing and start simply being present, being gentle with yourself, being aware of what is here now instead of what might be gone tomorrow. Even the good things, the ones that feel permanent now, those too are passing. And that makes them more precious, not less. It means we get to enjoy them while they're here, without trying to freeze them in place. We get to appreciate without possessing, love without needing control, rest without needing everything to be perfect or permanent. Let go of the chase, just for tonight. Let go of the story that tells you more will finally make you feel like enough. You are already enough. The Stoics lived with this understanding at the center of everything. They built their peace on what cannot be taken: reason, integrity, perspective. And from that peace came a different way of living. One that didn't resist change, but flowed with it. One that didn't demand certainty, but found steadiness in the self. You are allowed to do the same. You don't need to chase anymore. You don't need to outrun impermanence. You can just rest now. In this moment, everything you need is already here. There is a common thought, quiet but persistent, that rest must be earned, that sleep is a reward only after productivity, that stillness must be justified by exhaustion, and if you've done little or not enough, then you should not stop. You should keep going, stay awake, keep proving. But the Stoics saw things differently. They didn't see sleep as laziness. They saw it as part of the natural rhythm of being alive. Just as plants close at night, just as animals rest when the sun falls, we too are built to pause. Not as a sign of weakness, but as an act of harmony with nature. The Stoics believed in living according to nature, not just the trees and sky, but our own human nature, the cycles within us, the needs we carry, not as flaws, but as signals. And sleep, soft, quiet, essential, was one of them. Not an indulgence, not a failure of discipline, but a return to balance, a step in the rhythm of being alive. Marcus Aurelius, in his Reflections, often reminded himself to live simply, in line with what the body and the soul truly needed. When you have trouble getting out of bed in the morning, he wrote to himself, remember that your nature is to work, but also to rest. The same voice that pushed him forward during the day reminded him again and again that rest was not neglecting duty. It was part of it. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. There's a gentle wisdom in recognizing that the body knows when to stop, that the mind becomes softer, slower, not because it is failing, but because it is preparing to restore. We don't question hunger or thirst. We don't think breathing deeply is a sign of laziness. But with sleep, we often resist. We delay it. We label it unnecessary or unearned. The Stoics would ask us to pause there and to notice that this resistance is not reason. It's habit. And it's a habit worth releasing. To rest is not to retreat from life, but to participate in it fully. A tired mind is more reactive, more easily stirred, more vulnerable to emotion. A rested one is clearer, more composed, more in touch with reason, and less thrown off course by passing thoughts. The Stoics valued that clarity. They nurtured it not through constant motion, but through rhythm, through knowing when to stop. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. There is nothing disloyal about turning the light off, nothing selfish about giving yourself space to recover. There is no virtue in stretching yourself until you break. The Stoics weren't chasing exhaustion. They weren't proving anything by staying awake. They trusted that even the best minds, perhaps especially the best minds, needed time away from the noise, from effort, from thinking. They knew that renewal doesn't happen while the mind is tense. It happens in stillness. Nature does not rush, yet everything gets done. The waves keep moving, the sun keeps rising, trees shed their leaves in time, animals find shelter without a schedule. The Stoics took this in and asked, why should I live as if I am separate from all this? Why should I force what life already flows through? You are not an exception to nature. You are not outside it. You belong to it, as much as any branch or breeze. And nature does not shame you for being tired. When you close your eyes, you are not giving up. You are returning. Returning to yourself, to your breath, to a softer place inside. Not abandoning your values, but resting in them. You're still you in sleep, still steady, still strong, still whole. Let the thought go that rest is something to apologize for, that you must be drained before you deserve it, that you must explain your fatigue. You are not a machine to be measured by output. You are a living being. And all living things need time to recover. You may feel tonight that you haven't done enough, that something is unfinished, that you could have tried harder, reached farther, completed more. The Stoics would gently say, let that thought pass. The day is done. You are here. You are breathing. That is enough. The rest will wait, and you will meet it better from stillness than from strain. The ancient philosophers didn't hide from life, but they didn't chase it endlessly either. They moved through each day with presence, and when the day ended, they didn't cling to it. They let it go. As you can let this day go now. Whatever it held, whatever it didn't, it's behind you. Sleep is not weakness. It is wisdom. It is trust. It is the quiet knowing that rest is not a break from life. It is part of life, and you are allowed to live fully and still rest completely. So let go. Let your thoughts fall. Let your body sink. There is nothing more to do tonight. You are in harmony with nature now, and nature is never in a hurry. The pace of the world often feels fast, faster than we can keep up with. One thing leads to the next. Messages, tasks, expectations. We rush from one moment to another, trying to finish, trying to catch up, trying to stay ahead. But in that rush, something gets lost. Not just time, but presence. Not just energy, but clarity. The Stoics, living in their own chaotic times, saw this clearly. They understood that speed, when driven by fear or impatience, rarely leads to peace. Seneca said it plainly. He who hurries stumbles. Haste is not always about movement. Often it lives in the mind, a sense of urgency that never quite goes away. A quiet voice that says you're falling behind, that there's more to do, more to fix, more to become. Even in rest, the mind may still rush, planning, reviewing, scanning for what's next. And in that rushing, we lose the very stillness we're hoping to reach. The Stoics didn't celebrate slowness for its own sake. They valued deliberate action, clear thinking, the ability to move with intention, not panic. They believed that anything done well must first be done calmly. When we rush, we react. When we slow down, we choose. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. Hurrying, for the Stoics, was often the result of forgetting what truly matters, of placing too much importance on appearances, outcomes, or timing. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself not to be distracted by things that have no meaning. And when we rush, we often give meaning to things that don't deserve it. We treat every delay as a disaster, every mistake as final, every interruption as a crisis. But life doesn't demand that from us. Most of what seems urgent is not. Most of what pressures us can wait. And in the quiet space between rushing and resting, we begin to notice this. We begin to see that we are allowed to slow down. That speed doesn't equal success. That urgency isn't the same as importance. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. The body knows this already. It resists the push. It shows its strain through tension, through shallow breaths, through the way sleep comes late and restless. Hurrying doesn't end when the task is done. It lingers in the nervous system, in the thoughts that won't stop cycling. That's why the Stoics encouraged returning again and again to the present, to this moment. Not the one that just passed, not the one you're imagining, just this one. There is no wisdom in stumbling toward peace, no calm found through racing. And when we hurry, we lose sight of what we already have. The meal becomes just fuel. The walk becomes just a commute. The conversation becomes just background noise. And before we realize it, days pass without presence. But when we slow down, even slightly, the day opens up, not with more time, but with more space inside, enough to breathe, enough to think, enough to feel grounded again. The Stoics believed that haste clouds judgment, that it leads us to speak too soon, assume too much, act too quickly. And often, we regret those choices, not because we meant harm, but because we moved before we saw clearly. They taught that reflection should come before reaction, that steady minds make better decisions, that slow is not weak, it's wise. Let yourself slow now. Let go of the race. You are not late, you are not behind, you are not being measured by how quickly you solve your life. There is a different way to live, not without movement, but without panic, with rhythm instead of rushing, with awareness instead of urgency. That's what the Stoics practiced, and it's what you can allow yourself tonight. This moment is not in a hurry, and you don't have to be either. You've done what you could today. You've reached the place where stopping is not a delay. It's a return to yourself, to a rhythm that's been waiting underneath the pace of everything else. The world will keep spinning. The things you've left undone will still be there tomorrow. But tonight, you are here, and here there is no need to run. Rest does not ask for speed, it asks for permission. Permission to stop. Permission to trust that slowing down is not losing time. It is regaining it. Regaining attention. Regaining peace. Regaining the kind of presence that only arrives when the mind is quiet and the body is still. So let the rush pass. Let the thoughts fall behind. Nothing important needs to happen right now. You are allowed to move slowly. You are allowed to rest. The Stoics placed reason at the center of a good life. To live well was to live in accordance with reason, not with impulse, not with fear, not with what the crowd happened to value that day. And reason, they believed, was not cold or harsh. It was steady, measured, aligned with nature, which meant that a life lived by reason would include effort, yes, but also rest. Because reason, when listened to closely, does not demand we push ourselves past the point of clarity. It doesn't celebrate exhaustion. It recognizes limits and honors rhythm. And in that way, to rest is not to give in to laziness. It is to obey reason. There's a quiet strength in choosing to stop, not because you're defeated, but because you understand your own nature. Because you know that a tired mind doesn't think clearly, and a worn-out body can't carry purpose well. The Stoics weren't interested in appearances. They didn't ask, "How much have you done today?" They asked, "Did you act with wisdom?" And sometimes wisdom looks like stepping away, sitting down, closing your eyes, letting your thoughts stretch out and soften. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. Marcus Aurelius, an emperor surrounded by duties and distractions, reminded himself in his journal, "When you arise in the morning, remember what a precious privilege it is to be alive." But he also reminded himself, again and again, that nature has its cycles, that a full day includes not just work, but release, not just action, but restoration. To live according to nature meant recognizing when the day had offered enough, and when it was time to return to stillness. Reason tells us this, too. It whispers when the mind is too crowded to think well, when the body grows tense from too many hours upright, when the thoughts begin to circle instead of flow. And we often hear it, but don't listen. We override it. We say, "Just a bit more," or "I'll rest when I'm done." But reason doesn't wait for the to-do list to be empty. It reminds us that rest isn't earned through exhaustion. It's part of balance. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. Tonight, if you feel the weight of things unfinished, if your thoughts are still scanning the day for what was missed or left undone, remember that reason is not asking you to fix everything. It's asking you to care for yourself so that you can return to life tomorrow with steadiness, so that your judgments are clear, so that your actions come from presence, not pressure. The Stoics valued self-discipline, but not self-punishment. They didn't believe virtue came from grinding yourself into the ground. They knew that a well-ordered mind could only emerge from a well-rested one. That clear perspective depends on space, that we cannot reason well when we are running on empty. And so, rest becomes part of the path, not something separate, not something indulgent, but something essential. To rest is to obey reason. It's to recognize that you are not separate from the nature you walk through each day. You are made of it. You are shaped by it. And nature does not demand constant output. The trees pause, the sky darkens, the animals lie still, and you, too, are meant to slow. Seneca spoke of this when he wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." He wasn't urging endless productivity. He was inviting attention. And to rest with intention is to live without waste. It is to give your body what it needs, without shame. To give your mind the silence it cannot find in motion. To stop, not as a failure of will, but as an act of clarity. Let yourself feel that now, the slow return to ease, the quiet decision to no longer push. Not because you've surrendered, but because you're aligned, because you're listening to the part of yourself that knows what's needed, even when the world doesn't say it out loud. There is wisdom in this moment, the kind that doesn't need words, the kind that arrives when the lights are low and the air is still, and nothing is being asked of you. You've done what you could today. Reason does not ask for more. You're allowed to stop. You're allowed to rest. And by doing so, you are not stepping away from the Stoic path. You're walking it, quietly, gently, truly. There is a kind of strength that doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't push to be seen, doesn't compete for attention, doesn't need to win the last word. It simply waits. It observes. It listens. And when it speaks, if it speaks, it does so calmly, without rush or need. This is the strength the Stoics admired, not the kind that dominates a room, but the kind that remains composed when others cannot. The kind that holds its ground without raising its tone. The kind that lives in silence. To the Stoics, silence was not the absence of words. It was the presence of control. It was a sign of a mind that didn't spill its thoughts without care, didn't react to every provocation, didn't mistake noise for substance. Epictetus once said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." It was a reminder that silence is not weakness. It's discipline. It's presence. It's strength that doesn't need to perform. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. When you allow silence into your life, not just the quiet of a room, but the quiet inside the mind, you make space for something more stable to emerge. Perspective, clarity, choice. Without silence, the mind runs like a current stirred by every ripple, opinions, distractions, arguments, expectations. But with silence, the water stills. And in that stillness, the truth becomes easier to see. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. Not every thought needs to be spoken. Not every feeling needs to be shared right away. Not every disagreement needs your reply. The Stoics didn't suppress emotion. They simply didn't allow emotion to speak before reason had a chance to arrive. And silence gave reason room to breathe. In silence, we notice the shape of our thoughts. We begin to see which ones are useful and which are simply noise. We recognize how often we speak to be heard, not to understand. How often we fill silence, not because it needs filling, but because we're uncomfortable with what might emerge if we sit with it. But silence is not empty. It's full of everything we usually overlook. A breath, a pause, the slow rhythm of the present moment. When we stop speaking, we start listening, and not just to others, but to ourselves, to what we actually think, beyond habit, to what we actually feel, beyond impulse. The Stoics practiced silence not to withdraw from the world, but to remain steady within it, to hear the noise without becoming part of it, to understand before reacting, to choose their words rather than be carried away by them. In a world that speaks quickly, silence is a sign of strength, because it takes more effort to pause than to react, more discipline to wait than to respond right away. And silence isn't just something you offer others, it's something you offer yourself. A break from explaining, defending, adjusting. A moment to simply exist without having to perform. It is a return to stillness, a place where the mind can breathe again. Let yourself have that now. Let the thoughts slow. Let the pressure to respond fall away. There is no conversation waiting, no expectation to meet, no explanation to give. You are allowed to be quiet. You are allowed to rest. The Stoics trusted silence not as a retreat, but as a tool, a way to protect energy, a way to guard peace, a way to keep from being pulled into every passing storm. They knew that many problems solve themselves if we don't rush in to fix them, that many conflicts soften when met with calm instead of argument. And often, the most powerful thing you can do is say nothing, not to avoid responsibility, but to choose presence over reaction, to protect your peace instead of proving your point, to be firm in your sense of self, even when the world tries to shake it. Silence is not detachment, it is awareness. It's the strength to remain centered while others drift. It's the space that allows your thoughts to become more than just reflex. It's what turns reaction into response. And tonight, it's what lets your mind slow enough to rest. You don't have to keep talking to yourself in circles. You don't have to answer every question your mind raises. Some thoughts can be left unanswered. Some feelings don't need an audience. Some moments are better met with stillness than sound. Let this be one of them. There is nothing you need to say right now. No one you need to be for anyone else. The strength is not in continuing to think or speak. It's in allowing everything to quiet, even if just for a little while. You are safe in this silence, and in this silence, you are strong. The Stoics often looked to nature for guidance, not as something separate from themselves, but as something they were deeply part of. They believed that if we could understand how nature moves, how it grows, how it rests, then we could learn how to live more peacefully. And one of the things they noticed, again and again, was that nothing natural is rushed. The tree does not hurry to bloom. The river doesn't push itself faster than its current allows. The sun rises, not with force, but with consistency. Everything in nature unfolds in its time. It doesn't panic when the clouds roll in. It doesn't try to skip ahead to the next phase. It simply moves, patiently, through its cycle. And to the Stoics, that rhythm was not something to admire from a distance. it was something to live by. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, no great thing is created suddenly. There must be time. He was reminding himself not to force progress, not to demand instant results. He understood that anything meaningful, anything rooted, anything real, comes slowly. And when we rush, when we try to push life forward faster than it wants to move, we often lose our footing. We stumble not because we're weak, but because we're trying to live outside of our natural rhythm. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. Modern life often teaches the opposite, that faster is better, that more is better, that if something hasn't happened yet, it's because we haven't tried hard enough. But the Stoics would ask us to question that. They would say, are you rushing because the moment requires it, or because your fear is speaking louder than your reason? So much of our stress comes from wanting to be somewhere else, further ahead, more complete, more certain. We measure ourselves against invisible timelines and tell ourselves that we're behind. But behind what? Nature has no clock. It grows as it grows, heals as it heals, changes as it's ready to. And if we can allow ourselves to move with that kind of patience, even just a little, then something inside begins to settle. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. If something hasn't happened yet, that doesn't mean it's lost. If progress feels slow, that doesn't mean it's not happening. The Stoics believed in effort, but not in strain. They believed in showing up, but not in forcing. Because when you trust the pace of things, you begin to live with less fear and more trust. You stop trying to rush the lesson, or the healing, or the growth, and you begin to let it unfold. There is nothing unnatural about needing time, nothing wrong with feeling like it's taking a while. What matters is not how quickly you move, but how steadily. The oak tree grows over years. The mountain forms over centuries. These are not signs of weakness. They are signs of lasting strength, of depth, of groundedness. The Stoics wouldn't rush you forward. They would not ask you to prove anything. They would only ask that you be honest, that you live with intention, and that you stop measuring your peace by how fast life is moving. Peace doesn't come from speed. It comes from alignment, from being in step with what this moment is actually asking of you. Not what you think it should ask, not what others expect, but what is true for you right now. And right now, maybe what's true is that you're tired. Maybe you don't need a new plan, or a push, or another round of effort. Maybe you just need to pause, to listen, to return to a rhythm that isn't rushed. Nature never doubts its timing. Neither should you. If something is meant for you, it won't require you to lose yourself trying to reach it. If something truly belongs in your life, it will come in its time. And if you feel slow tonight, if the path feels long or the answers still unclear, that's okay. The Stoics would remind you that clarity often comes after stillness, not before. That understanding doesn't arrive in a hurry. It arrives when you're quiet enough to receive it. So let yourself slow. Let yourself rest. There is no part of nature that blooms every day, and you are no exception. You are allowed to move slowly. You are allowed to grow quietly. You are allowed to take your time. Nothing natural is rushed, and you are part of nature too. There is often a quiet pressure following us through the day, unspoken, but constant. A sense that we are supposed to be more productive, more composed, more successful, that we should be doing something else, living some other version of life, becoming someone slightly different than who we are now. This idea of who we should be hovers in the background, shaping our choices, feeding our doubts, and making rest feel undeserved. The Stoics saw this kind of pressure as one of the great sources of suffering. Not because ambition is wrong, but because chasing a version of ourselves built on comparison or expectation can leave us in a state of endless reaching, never quite arriving, never quite feeling enough. Seneca warned against this when he said, "No man was ever wise by chance." What he meant was that peace doesn't just happen. It comes when we live thoughtfully, according to what is real, not according to an imagined ideal of who we think we're supposed to be. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. When we measure ourselves against a picture in the mind of who we should be by now, what we should have done, how we should feel, we are judging ourselves not by our values, but by an illusion. And illusions are always shifting. They're built from glimpses of other people's lives, from voices we've picked up along the way, from standards no one ever really defined. But the Stoics believed in returning to what is within, to what we can truly know. Our character, our intentions, the choices that are available to us in the present moment. They didn't ask us to become something else. They asked us to be in harmony with who we already are, stripped of pretense. Because when you stop trying to perform a version of yourself, you begin to feel the calm of simply existing. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not someone who needs to catch up to an invisible image in your mind. The Stoics believed that life is not about becoming a perfect version of yourself. It's about becoming aligned with reason, with nature, with what is honest and simple and clear. And that often begins by letting go of what you thought you had to be. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself." But he did not mean harshness. He meant discipline in thought, patience with the ego, care in choosing what matters. He meant freeing yourself from the need to be impressive, and returning instead to what is true, what is steady, what is kind. To let go of who you think you should be is not to stop growing. It's to stop pretending, to stop performing, to rest in the reality of who you are, here, now, imperfect, evolving, and entirely human. When you let go of that imagined version, you make room for gentleness, for the part of you that doesn't need to explain itself, for the part that already knows how to rest, if only the striving would quiet down. So much of what exhausts us isn't the work itself. It's the pressure to be a certain kind of person while doing it. The belief that our worth is tied to some final, polished state. But the Stoics didn't live for perfection. They lived for presence, for effort, for character. And none of those things require you to be someone else. They only ask you to be yourself, with care. Let yourself settle into that now. Let yourself breathe without performing. There is nothing to prove tonight. There is no one else you need to be. This moment doesn't ask for the version of you that you imagined when you were worried or tired or comparing yourself to others. It asks only for what is already here. The Stoics believed that peace comes when we stop resisting the present moment. And much of that resistance comes from thinking we are supposed to be someone other than who we are. But you are allowed to be unfinished. You are allowed to be in process. You are allowed to rest without having everything figured out. You don't have to chase the image anymore. You can let it go. And in that letting go, you may find something even more valuable, yourself, as you are. Quiet, aware, grounded, not trying to be anything more, just being. That is enough for now. Let yourself rest. There's a quiet fear that often lingers beneath our days, the idea that if we stop, we will fall behind. That rest is a kind of failure, that if we pause, even for a little while, the world will move on without us. It's a fear that makes rest feel dangerous, like something to avoid or postpone, something we'll do later when everything is finished, when it's been earned. But the Stoics would have gently challenged that belief. They didn't tie virtue to exhaustion. They didn't measure character by how much one could endure before collapsing. They knew that stopping was not punishment. It was part of the rhythm of living wisely. They believed that we are not machines to be driven endlessly. We are people, and people need time to breathe, to reflect, to stop, not as a sign of weakness, but as a sign of reason. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. Marcus Aurelius, a man burdened by the weight of an empire, often reminded himself that it was okay to step back. He wrote, "Nowhere you can go is more peaceful, more free of interruptions than your own soul." He returned to this thought over and over again, especially when the outside world became overwhelming. He didn't see stopping as abandonment of duty. He saw it as a return to balance, a return to what mattered. We live in a time that confuses motion with value, as if doing more always means being more, as if stopping is dangerous or selfish or wasteful. But when we carry this belief too long, we begin to see ourselves only in terms of what we've produced, what we've completed, and anything that slows that momentum feels like failure. But it's not. You are not punished for stopping. You are allowed to pause without consequence. You are allowed to breathe without apology. The Stoics believed in action, but only when it came from clarity, from calm, from presence. And that kind of action can't survive in constant movement. It needs stillness. It needs the space that stopping creates. When we rest, we don't lose ourselves. We return to ourselves. We remember that we are more than our tasks, more than our goals, more than the endless chase to keep up. And in that remembering, we make space for a quieter kind of strength. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. The day is already behind you. Whatever was done or left undone belongs to the past. The present doesn't ask for more effort. It doesn't require you to fix anything right now. All it asks is that you let go, that you trust yourself enough to stop without fear. Seneca once said, "He who is everywhere is nowhere," and the same is true for those who never stop moving. When you are always rushing to the next thing, you miss the life that is unfolding in front of you. You miss the peace that is already here. But when you stop, even briefly, you return to what is real. The breath, the body, the quiet. Stopping does not erase progress. It protects it. It allows you to carry it forward more mindfully. It gives your efforts space to settle, to take root, to grow from the inside, rather than being stretched thin across too many directions. There is no punishment for resting. There is only relief. And often, once we stop, we see things more clearly. We notice the tension we've been holding, the thoughts we've been repeating, the quiet exhaustion beneath the surface. And in that noticing, we begin to heal. You are not falling behind. You are not failing. You are honoring something very old, something the Stoics trusted deeply, that a calm mind makes better choices, that a rested body serves others more kindly, that a person who knows how to stop is not abandoning life. They are participating in it more fully. The world will wait. Your tasks will wait. Even your thoughts can wait. And while they do, you can be here, still, unrushed, unburdened. There is nothing to make up for. There is only now. And now is enough. So let go of the idea that stopping costs you something. It doesn't. It gives you something. Something deeper than accomplishment. Something more lasting than progress. It gives you peace. Let yourself rest in that. Let yourself trust that you aren't being left behind. You are simply choosing to live at a pace that honors your limits. A pace that listens to what your body and your mind have been quietly asking for. And in doing that, you are not punished. You are free. There is a part of the mind that continues to carry things long after they've ended. A sentence spoken years ago. A moment that didn't unfold the way we hoped. A decision we wish we'd made differently. These pieces of the past remain stored in memory, replaying quietly beneath the surface. And with each replay, they ask for attention, as if the past still needs to be sorted, justified, or corrected. The Stoics understood how tempting it is to live inside those memories, to keep reviewing, reworking, reimagining. But they also knew that the past is not a place to live. It's a place to learn from, and then move forward. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, what stands in the way becomes the way. But that only happens when we stop carrying the past as a weight and start seeing it as a path. When we stop dragging it and start releasing it. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. The mind will return to the past again and again. That's natural. It's part of how we make sense of things. But the Stoics would ask, what is useful here? What thought? What reflection? What lesson can I carry forward? And once that's clear, everything else can be let go. Not because it didn't matter, but because it's no longer necessary. The past no longer serves when it becomes a cycle, when it keeps you awake, asking questions that cannot be answered, when it pulls your attention away from the present moment and into a version of life that cannot be changed. That's when it becomes noise, not guidance. That's when it stops being memory and becomes a burden. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. The Stoics would never ask you to forget, but they would gently invite you to put things down, to notice the difference between remembering and reliving, to see that returning to a wound doesn't help it heal, that reviewing the same regret does not undo it, and that sometimes the most reasonable thing to do is to stop trying to make sense of what's already gone. Seneca wrote, "What is past is gone and cannot be recalled. What is to come is uncertain. Only the present is ours." In those words is a freedom, a reminder that the only place we can act, the only place we can rest, is here. Not in the memory, not in the echo, but in this quiet moment where nothing is required of you except stillness. The past cannot follow you here, not unless you invite it in. So much energy is spent trying to make peace with moments that have already passed. And often, what we're really trying to do is forgive ourselves for not knowing more, for not doing differently. But the Stoics saw life as a process of learning. They didn't expect perfection from anyone, not even themselves. They expected growth, and growth requires release. Let yourself release now. You've already thought about it enough. You've already done what you could. Whatever happened, it shaped you. It brought you here. And now it can rest. The past doesn't need your attention tonight. The Stoics saw rest not as an escape, but as a return, to reason, to calm, to truth. And the truth is that the past cannot harm you unless you keep reliving it. There is a part of the mind that continues to carry things long after they've ended. A sentence spoken years ago. A moment that didn't unfold the way we hoped. A decision we wish we'd made differently. These pieces of the past remain stored in memory, replaying quietly beneath the surface. And with each replay, they ask for attention, as if the past still needs to be sorted, justified, or corrected. The Stoics understood how tempting it is to live inside those memories, to keep reviewing, reworking, reimagining. But they also knew that the past is not a place to live. It's a place to learn from, and then move forward. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, what stands in the way becomes the way. But that only happens when we stop carrying the past as a weight and start seeing it as a path. When we stop dragging it and start releasing it. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. The mind will return to the past again and again. That's natural. It's part of how we make sense of things. But the Stoics would ask, what is useful here? What thought? What reflection? There is a quiet misunderstanding that strength must always look like motion. That wisdom means pressing forward, regardless of the cost. That to be brave, or noble, or disciplined, is to remain in the thick of life, always showing up, always giving more. But the Stoics saw something different. They understood that even the wisest among us must sometimes step back. That retreat is not a failure of the will, but a choice to protect what matters. Even the wise retreat. Marcus Aurelius, in the middle of his responsibilities as emperor, returned again and again to the idea of the retreat, not in the form of escape, but in the form of stillness. People tried to get away from it all, to the country, to the beach, to the mountains, he wrote. You always wish for that too, but you can get away from it any time you like, by going within. For him, retreat wasn't about leaving the world behind. It was about finding a place where the mind could breathe again, a return to inner calm. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. Even the most grounded mind needs a pause. Even those who live with clarity must protect their energy. The Stoics didn't imagine the wise person as someone untouched by life, unaffected by pressure. They knew that life touches everyone, that exhaustion can creep in slowly, that tension builds in the background, and so they made space for rest. They honored the need to step back, not to withdraw forever, but to return more fully later. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. The wise retreat, not because they're weak, but because they are aware. They know when to stop giving, when to stop pushing, when to stop trying to hold it all together. They recognize that calm doesn't grow in constant noise, that peace doesn't arrive through endless strain, and that true wisdom is not about enduring more than others. It's about knowing when to pause before you've gone too far. To step away for a while is not to abandon the world. It's to remember that you are not responsible for carrying it alone. You can care deeply and still rest completely. You can live with intention and still choose quiet. And you are not any less wise, strong, or capable because you need time to yourself. The Stoics would remind you, even the best minds have limits. Even the most balanced person needs time to rebalance. The retreat of the wise is gentle. It's not dramatic or final. It's not about running or hiding. It's about stepping into a quieter room, one where the noise fades and the breath returns and the body softens just enough to feel like itself again. That space exists for everyone, and it doesn't need to be far away. It only needs to be chosen. You're allowed to choose it now. The day has already asked enough of you, and what remains can wait. The wise do not answer every call. They do not rush to meet every expectation. They listen to their inner rhythm, and when it tells them to stop, they stop. Not with guilt, but with trust. Seneca spoke often about preserving the soul, about finding intervals of quiet so that we are not worn thin by the demands of life. He did not believe that strength was found in constant output. He believed it was found in intention, in choosing when to act and when not to. Let yourself retreat tonight, just for a while. Let yourself step back from the world, not to avoid it, but to return to it with gentleness, with steadiness, with clarity that only stillness can bring. The wise know that retreat is not the opposite of living. It is part of it. It is the breath between steps, the silence between notes, the space where meaning grows. You don't need to explain why you're tired. You don't need to justify the need to stop. You are not being judged for taking a step inward. This is where balance begins again, not by doing more, but by doing less, by turning down the volume, by making space inside. Even the wise retreat. And tonight, you can too. Close the door behind you. Let your thoughts quiet. Let your shoulders rest. Let the day release its hold. You are not falling behind. You are not giving up. You are doing what the wisest have always done. You are returning home to yourself. There's a quiet belief many carry without realizing it. The idea that exhaustion is something we owe. That being tired proves we're trying hard enough. That if we are rested, calm, or at ease, then we must be missing something. Not contributing enough. Not keeping up. And so we stretch ourselves a little thinner. Stay up a little later. Push just a little further past what feels reasonable. Not because anyone asked us to, but because somewhere along the way we began to believe that rest must be earned through depletion. But the Stoics never taught that peace required suffering. They didn't measure a good life by how tired you were at the end of the day. They measured it by how wisely and intentionally you lived. Seneca wrote, "No person has the power to have everything they want, but it is in their power not to want what they don't have, and to cheerfully put to good use what they do have. That includes your energy, your time, your attention. These are not debts you owe to the world. They are resources to be guarded with care. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. Exhaustion is not a virtue. It's a signal. A quiet message from the body and the mind that something needs to pause. And it's easy to ignore, easy to explain away, to say there's more to do, more to give, more to hold together. But the Stoics believed in balance. They believed in pacing oneself to meet the whole of life, not just one urgent corner of it. They saw burnout not as something admirable, but as something misaligned. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. There is nothing noble about giving so much that you have nothing left. You are not more valuable because you're running on empty. You don't prove your goodness by sacrificing your well-being. And you are not required to feel drained in order to feel worthy. The Stoics placed responsibility on the self, but not to the point of self-erasure. They urge people to examine what they gave their energy to and why, to ask whether each task, each obligation, each expectation served the greater good, or only served the fear of disappointing others. And when the answer was unclear, they would recommend stepping back, reflecting, rebalancing. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself constantly, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. And by that same logic, if it costs your health, if it erodes your peace, if it pulls you away from the person you are trying to be, it may not be yours to carry. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to stop. And you are allowed to rest before you collapse. No one benefits from your exhaustion. Not really. When your mind is scattered, when your presence is thin, when your patience is worn down to a thread, you are not giving more. You are giving less of yourself to more things. The Stoics would ask you to be precise, to know your limits, to use your strength not to appear strong, but to act wisely. Let yourself rest from the need to do it all. Let yourself step back from the sense that you owe the world your constant effort. You don't. What you owe is something different. You owe the world your clarity, your kindness, your presence. And none of those thrive in exhaustion. You are not behind. You are not selfish for stopping. You are not disappointing anyone by taking care of yourself. The person who pauses to protect their peace is not weak. They are awake, aware, aligned with something deeper than obligation. You owe no one your exhaustion. You are allowed to go gently, to take up less space for a while, to listen to what the quieter parts of yourself have been trying to say, that it's okay to stop now, that you've done enough for today, that the world will still be here when you return in the morning, rested and whole. The Stoics believed in responsibility, but they also believed in the preservation of the self. Not preservation through withdrawal, but through balance, through remembering that a healthy mind, like a well-tended garden, cannot thrive in overuse. It needs sun and shade, effort and stillness, attention and pause. You don't have to explain your rest to anyone. You're allowed to be tired. You're allowed to close the door. And tonight, you're allowed to be no one but yourself. Not a role, not a task list, just a person, breathing, slowing, letting go. Let the day fall behind you. Let sleep come without resistance. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are simply human. And you've earned your rest, not through exhaustion, but through the wisdom of knowing when to stop. Sometimes the mind says, just a little more. One more thing to finish, one more task to complete, one more thought to figure out. There's a pull to keep going, to keep shaping the day, to push through the discomfort in hopes that peace will come after the list is done, after everything makes sense, after you've finally earned it. But the Stoics saw peace differently. They didn't treat it as a reward for effort. They didn't tie it to output or success. They believed peace came not from doing more, but from needing less, from quieting the mind rather than filling it, from loosening the grip rather than tightening it. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. Peace, they believed, was found in how you approach life, not how much you accomplish within it. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." And craving doesn't always look like ambition. It often hides inside over-efforting. That quiet belief that peace is always just beyond the next task, that you have to earn your right to rest, that something else must be done first. But when peace is always somewhere else, always just out of reach, then effort becomes a kind of chase. Not because the work is wrong, but because the reason behind it is off balance. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself often, "Be content with what you are, and wish not to change, nor dread the future, nor long for the past." This kind of peace doesn't come from effort. It comes from acceptance, from learning how to stop without guilt, how to let the mind soften without resistance. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. The Stoics didn't ask you to do nothing. They valued discipline and presence. But they knew that rest is not laziness, that stillness is not idleness. They understood that more effort isn't always what's missing. Sometimes what's missing is permission to stop trying so hard. You don't need to try harder to be at ease. You don't need to solve everything before you can sleep. You don't need to untangle every thought, perfect every moment, or carry every weight just a little further. Peace is not hiding behind more effort. It's waiting here, beneath it, beneath the noise, beneath the pressure, beneath the feeling that something must still be done. The Stoics believed in clarity, in seeing things as they are, not as they should be. And what they saw, clearly, was that peace often comes when we choose not to chase it, when we stop adding to the day and allow it to end, when we stop correcting the moment and simply rest inside it. Let go of the pressure to perfect this day. Let go of the belief that just a little more effort will make everything feel okay. Maybe it already is okay. Maybe peace doesn't require more work. Maybe it requires more stillness. Peace doesn't live in the finish line. It lives in the pause, in the breath, in the moment when you realize you don't need to prove anything right now. You don't need to be impressive. You don't need to be productive. You just need to be here. The Stoics knew that peace is fragile when tied to things outside our control. Results, reactions, outcomes. And effort, though useful, can become a trap when we use it to try to control what was never ours. They would say, return to what's within. Your thoughts, your choices, your breath. That is where peace begins. Not when you try harder, but when you stop needing to try at all. You are allowed to stop now. You are allowed to rest without finishing everything. You are allowed to let things remain incomplete. There is no extra prize for pushing past your limits. No hidden virtue in adding one more thing. Sometimes wisdom is simply knowing when to stop. When to say, that's enough for today. When to lie down without guilt and sleep without solving. Let the effort fall away, just for now. Let the tension ease from your shoulders. Let your mind settle without answers. Let yourself drift, not because you're escaping, but because you've finally stopped reaching. You are already enough. And tonight, peace is not something to earn. It is something to allow. So much of our restlessness begins with desire, the desire for more, for something to change, for something we don't yet have, or something we're afraid of losing. The mind fixates, turns toward it, shapes thoughts around it. Sometimes it's subtle. The desire to be understood, to be right, to be admired, or protected, or complete. And in that quiet craving, stillness becomes hard to find. The Stoics understood this well. They taught that desire, more than external events, is often the source of suffering. Not because wanting is wrong, but because attachment to what we want, when we want it, how we want it, creates tension. It pulls the mind out of the present and into longing, and in that longing we lose the simplicity of what is already here. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. When we desire something intensely, we create conditions for our peace. I'll rest once this happens. I'll feel okay if they respond. I'll be content when things finally go my way. But the Stoics taught that peace doesn't depend on what comes next. It depends on how we relate to what is now. Epictetus said, freedom is not achieved by satisfying desire, but by eliminating it. He didn't mean giving up joy. He meant that by loosening the grip on what we think we need, we discover what we already have. Desire pulls us forward. It leans us into the future. It creates pressure to shape outcomes that are often beyond our control. And that pressure builds inside the body. Tension in the chest, unease in the stomach, thoughts that keep spinning. Stillness is not the absence of motion outside. It is the softening of that internal reaching. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. Desire can whisper that you are not enough yet, that rest is a reward for achievement, that you must become more before you can feel calm. But the Stoics would remind you that calm is your natural state, beneath the craving, beneath the urgency, beneath the imagined stories about what life must become. Desire is not just about things. It's about outcomes, about being seen a certain way, about feeling in control. And when we're attached to those outcomes, we carry a quiet fear that without them, something is missing, that we are missing. But nothing essential can be taken from you, not your character, not your ability to choose, not your capacity to begin again. Stillness begins when you let go of needing something else to happen. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." That kind of life isn't found through constant striving. It's uncovered when we stop chasing, even for a moment, and listen to the quiet that remains. It's okay to want things, but wanting without clinging, that's where peace begins. When we hold our hopes lightly, we remain grounded. When we accept that not everything is in our hands, we stop gripping so hard. And in that release, we feel the first signs of rest returning. Let yourself release tonight, not your dreams, not your values, just the weight of needing things to be different than they are, just the thought that something out there will finally make you feel okay in here. The Stoics knew that detachment is not coldness, it's clarity. It's knowing the difference between what you care about and what you control, between what is meaningful and what is necessary for your peace. And when we detach, we don't stop living. We begin to live more freely, more fully, without dragging the future into every breath. Let yourself be still now. There is no rush. There is nothing more to win before you rest. There is no outcome tonight that needs your attention. Peace is already here, wading beneath the pull of desire. You don't need to reach for it. You just need to stop reaching. Some things move no matter how much we try to hold them still. People make choices we can't predict. Circumstances change without warning. Plans drift from their path. The world, in all its complexity, does what it will, spinning forward with its own rhythm, far beyond our reach. The Stoics knew this well. They didn't try to bend the world to their liking. Instead, they learned how to live within it, with strength, with calm, with clarity. They believed that trying to control what is outside our power only leads to suffering. The wise path, they said, is not to resist the current, but to move with it. To let the world be what it is, and to let ourselves remain steady inside it. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. When you let the world do what it will, you're not giving up. You're letting go of a kind of pressure that was never yours to carry. You're releasing the need to manage every outcome, to interpret every reaction, to solve every uncertainty. The world doesn't wait for our instructions. It unfolds in its own way, often without our approval. And the Stoics remind us, this is not a flaw. It's the nature of things. Marcus Aurelius wrote, You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. The storms, the noise, the people moving in and out of our lives, we can't stop any of it. But we can stop confusing that movement with personal failure. We can stop believing that everything must go our way before we are allowed to rest. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. There is peace in understanding that not every difficulty is yours to fix, that not every chaos is a call for your involvement. Some things happen simply because they do. Some people act not because of you, but because of their own path. And sometimes the best response is not reaction, but stillness. A breath, a quiet space inside yourself where you remember what is truly yours. The Stoics believed that what happens in the world is neutral. What gives it meaning is how we respond. If someone speaks harshly, the words are only sound until we assign them weight. If a plan falls apart, the change is only painful if we demand it stay the same. And if the world is loud, unsteady, unpredictable, it does not mean we must be the same. Let the world do what it will. Let others come to their own conclusions. Let events unfold at their own pace. Your peace does not depend on any of it. The world will always be in motion, but you are not required to chase it. You're allowed to remain still while it turns, to rest even as it rushes, to breathe even when things are unresolved. The Stoics didn't wait for calm to find them. They built it from the inside out. This kind of calm doesn't come from knowing everything will work out. It comes from knowing you don't need to know. It comes from trusting that your strength lies not in controlling the world, but in how gently you can live inside it. You are not responsible for every outcome. You are not obligated to explain yourself to everyone. You are not required to carry what was never yours. You are allowed to rest, even while the world keeps spinning. Let the need to intervene soften. Let the need to be understood ease. Let the need to control loosen its grip. You are here. That is enough. Let go of the noise. Let go of the pace. Let go of the idea that peace must be earned by keeping everything in place. The Stoics would say, life is not chaotic because something has gone wrong. It is just life. And you can rest in the middle of it, without fixing, without managing, without chasing. You are allowed to lie back tonight without answers, without plans, without a strategy. Because peace is not a product of effort. It's what's left when effort ends. So let the world do what it will. And you, just be still. Not everything needs a reply. Not every opinion needs a counter. Not every moment asks for your participation. The world can be loud, full of messages, questions, reactions, requests. It can feel like silence is neglect, like not responding is failure, like stillness is falling behind. But the Stoics saw things differently. They believed that wisdom often lies not in what we say or do, but in what we choose to leave alone. You don't have to respond to everything. There is strength in stepping back, in watching a situation unfold without reaching for it, in letting a comment pass without weighing it down with meaning. The Stoics didn't speak because something had been said. They spoke when it was necessary. They didn't act because something happened. They acted when the moment aligned with virtue, with clarity, with purpose. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. When we respond to everything, we spread ourselves thin. We give our peace away in pieces, reacting to things that don't matter, or don't last, or aren't truly ours. We allow every question, every doubt, every judgment to enter the space of the mind, and we feel the need to answer them all, even when they were never truly directed at us. And in that constant responding, the self becomes unsettled. The Stoics taught the value of inner stillness. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "You always own the option of having no opinion. Not because opinions are wrong, but because they can become burdens. Because they can pull us into unnecessary conflict, or drain our energy, or tie us to events that don't concern our deeper values. Not every thought needs to be followed. Not every reaction needs to be spoken aloud. Sometimes the wisest thing is to pause and let it pass. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. There is freedom in knowing that silence is a choice, that you can watch a wave come and go without getting pulled in, that you can hear something and not take it personally, that you can see something unfold and choose, gently and clearly, not to respond. Stillness is not inaction, it's intention. It's the space between impulse and choice. It's what allows us to decide what matters and what doesn't. And in that space, rest becomes possible, because the mind is no longer on alert, no longer chasing resolution in every moment. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality, and many of those imagined sufferings come from rehearsing responses. What we should have said, what we might say next time, what we need to explain. But most of those conversations only happen in the mind. And the Stoics would remind us, those imagined dialogues don't require our presence. We are free to walk away from them. Let yourself walk away now." You don't need to finish the conversation in your head. You don't need to prepare the perfect reply. You don't need to revisit the moment and make it come out differently. It's already over. And even if something new arises tomorrow, you will meet it better from a rested place. You are not responsible for managing every emotion in the room. Not every misunderstanding must be fixed tonight. Not every disagreement needs to be resolved before you sleep. You are allowed to let it be. You are allowed to let others think what they think. You are allowed to let unanswered messages stay unanswered. The Stoics trusted that the mind is strongest when it's not pulled in every direction, that we are more clear when we're not tangled in every reaction, and that true calm is not found in the last word. It's found in the choice not to need one. Let your shoulders drop. Let your breath slow. Let the thought pass without grabbing hold. There is nothing left to respond to tonight. The moment is already moving on, and you can let it go with it. No judgment, no tension, just stillness. You are here now, and that's all that matters. Of all the things the body knows how to do, sleep is one of the most natural. It doesn't need to be forced or willed into being. When the time is right, the body begins to slow. Muscles soften, breathing deepens, the eyes become heavy. And slowly, without asking for permission, the body slips into rest. But the mind, the mind takes more convincing. Even as the body lies still, the mind may keep running. Thoughts arrive, some quiet, some loud, looping around questions, worries, things undone, words said or unsaid. It's tempting to believe that the mind must stay alert, just in case, as if vigilance at night will protect against the unknown. But the Stoics would remind us, what is beyond this moment is not ours to carry. And just as the body knows when to stop, the mind, too, deserves rest. You don't need to solve everything tonight. The Stoics understood that peace isn't just about external conditions. It's about internal permission. Permission to let go. To allow the present moment to be enough. to trust that nothing more is required right now. They practiced letting go of unnecessary thoughts, not by resisting them, but by not clinging to them. A thought may arise, but it does not have to stay. A worry may pass through, but it does not have to settle in. Marcus Aurelius, writing to himself in the quiet of his chamber, said, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment." The same holds true for the thoughts that press in at night. They seem important. They seem urgent. But often they are only shadows, distorted echoes of the day magnified in the silence. And silence is not something to fear. Silence is a space, a gentle container where nothing has to happen, where you don't have to reply or fix or perform. In that stillness, the mind can soften its grip. The Stoics trained their minds not to be silent through force, but through clarity, by remembering what matters and what does not, by focusing only on what they could control. And in the quiet, they could hear themselves more clearly. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. There is no need to rehearse tomorrow. It hasn't come yet. And there is no use in rewriting today. It's already done. What remains is now. And now is quiet. Now is simple. Now is enough. The mind often believes it must remain engaged to be safe, that if it rests, something important might be missed. But nothing important is happening now. All that matters is this breath, this moment, the softness of the air around you, the feeling of stillness as it settles into your limbs. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. Even the Stoic sages, men of great strength and discipline, knew the value of surrender. Not surrender to chaos, but to nature. And nature includes sleep. Sleep is not indulgence. It is not laziness. It is alignment with the rhythm of life itself, like the sun setting, like the tide receding, like the forest going quiet. Epictetus reminded his students, "Do not seek for events to happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do happen, and your life will go smoothly." Tonight, that event is rest. It is not something to be resisted. It is something to be welcomed. And part of welcoming it is allowing the mind to step down from its post, to stop searching, to stop guarding, to stop chasing. Let the thoughts come, and let them go. There is no need to entertain them, no need to argue with them, no need to finish them. Thoughts are just movements of the mind, like wind through leaves. They don't define you, they don't bind you, and they don't require your attention. The Stoics found peace in simplicity, in remembering what was essential and gently releasing the rest. That same practice can be done now, quietly, thought by thought, breath by breath. This moment is a clearing. There is no audience, no decisions to make, no one to please, no action to take, just this, just now. Let yourself lie back into the quiet. Let the body be still. Let the mind soften. There's no need to be anywhere else. No need to be anyone else. You have done enough. You are allowed to rest. The Stoics might say, let nature do its work. Sleep is part of that nature. Let it carry you now. Some days are not meant for building or striving or solving. Some days arrive gently, asking only for quiet, for stillness, for restraint. And on these days, virtue may look less like bold action and more like calm non-action. The Stoics understood that not all victories are loud. Sometimes the greatest strength is in what we choose not to do. In the words we don't speak when we are angry. In the arguments we do not start. In the harm we quietly decline to pass forward. It is easy to believe that every day must be productive to be meaningful, that unless we are advancing, we are falling behind. But this belief, when held too tightly, becomes its own form of restlessness. It ties our worth to motion and our peace to outcomes. Stoic wisdom reminds us that our true measure is not in what we accomplish, but in how we live. And some days, the kindest and wisest thing we can do is simply to do no harm. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." There is quiet power in those lines, a gentle, steady ethic, not one of constant performance, but of careful presence. Even if a day passes without any great triumph or change, it can still be a virtuous day, if we lived it without hurting ourselves or others. If we were patient when we might have been reactive, if we let someone else be wrong, rather than needing to prove ourselves right. You are not less worthy because you were quiet today. You are not failing just because you needed rest. Sometimes restraint is the most graceful kind of strength. Choosing not to feed a thought that would stir up anxiety, choosing not to revisit a memory that only brings pain, choosing not to act on impulse when your heart is still unsettled. These small acts of non-doing are hardly ever noticed by the world, but they are deeply seen by the soul. And the Stoics believed that this inner vision, this clear relationship with our own conscience, was more valuable than external praise. Seneca said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." And wasting time, to the Stoics, wasn't about not being busy. It was about losing sight of what really matters. If today you refrained from cruelty, from bitterness, from selfishness, even silently, even in your own thoughts, you did something meaningful. You protected the space around you from harm. That, too, is virtue. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. You don't need to prove your goodness through exhaustion. Let the day be what it was. Let tonight be free from pressure. There is a kind of peace that comes not from fixing, but from accepting, from knowing that you have not added to the burden of the world today, that you have not let your frustrations spill outward, that you have carried yourself with some measure of grace, even if only quietly, inwardly. These are not small things. Virtue, in Stoic terms, is living in agreement with nature, with reason, with conscience, with the simple truth of what is right. And sometimes the most natural, most reasonable thing is to stop, to pause, to not react, to not reach, to not push beyond what is kind or wise. Some days are like that. They don't call for movement, they call for restraint. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. Even the best people grow tired. Even the kindest hearts need time to be still. And in stillness, we are no less ourselves. We are not absent. We are restoring. Honoring the balance between doing and resting, between speaking and silence. This, too, is philosophy in motion. Philosophy not written in words or carried out in great deeds, but lived quietly, hour by hour. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to do less. Virtue does not require constant noise. Sometimes it is enough to simply not do harm, to not give in to the worst parts of ourselves, to not carry forward the weight we were handed. These are the hidden virtues, the ones no one sees, the ones that build peace without ever being praised. Let this moment be one of them. Let tonight be one of them. Of all the things a person might try to escape, none are more persistent than what lives quietly within. The Stoics understood that no change of scenery, no distant journey, No fresh start could ever erase what is unresolved inside. You flee, wrote Seneca, but your troubles run with you. Not as punishment, not as fate, but as a quiet truth. The self cannot be outrun. There's a natural instinct to move away from discomfort, to change jobs, end relationships, leave cities, rearrange schedules, believing, often with hope, that the source of unease lives out there. And sometimes change is wise. Sometimes it brings clarity. But if unrest is carried in the heart, it will settle into every new place like dust in the corners. The same thoughts return, the same reactions echo, the same fear or longing or anger reappears. Because it was never the place. It was the burden you brought with you. The Stoics didn't advise against change, but they taught that true rest comes only from within. They asked, what good is a quiet landscape if the mind is noisy? What use is a distant escape if the same anxious thoughts follow? It is the inner world that must be faced, not fought, not condemned, but understood. What you resist may persist, but what you observe gently begins to loosen. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. There's no need to run tonight, no need to solve it all. Just let yourself be still. Just let what's inside have space, not to control you, but to be seen. That's the first step toward peace. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. He didn't mean the soul was always calm. He meant it was the only place where calm could truly be built. Every attempt to run from it, through distraction, through denial, through overwork or constant motion, only delayed the inevitable. Eventually, one must sit quietly and listen, not to punish oneself, not to relive pain, but to allow things to come into view so they can soften. Avoidance can look like strength. It can feel like action. But avoidance drains energy. It fragments the mind. It interrupts rest. And the Stoics, always observant of human nature, knew that running from fear makes it larger. Running from grief prolongs it. Running from guilt or doubt or uncertainty gives those feelings room to root more deeply. But when you pause and simply let things be as they are, something changes. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. You don't need to chase or run tonight. Just breathe. Just be. There's wisdom in acknowledging discomfort without needing to escape it. There's strength in saying, this is here. I see it. Nothing more. No solutions required. No fixing. Just quiet recognition. The Stoics saw this as a kind of courage, a quiet defiance of the need to control. When you stop fleeing, you stop feeding the thing you fear. You give it no chase. And so, over time, it has nothing to grip. Rest becomes possible again. Sometimes, what we flee isn't even a single thought or memory. It's the feeling of being still, of being alone with ourselves, of hearing what's been pushed down for so long. But when stillness is avoided, peace never quite arrives. Every moment becomes an effort to stay ahead of something invisible. Tonight, you don't have to stay ahead. There's nowhere to go, nowhere better than this moment. Let everything you've tried to outrun slow down and meet you here. Let it sit beside you like a familiar shape. It doesn't need to be understood tonight. It doesn't need to go away. It only needs space. Often, that's enough. Seneca wrote, "The mind that is anxious about future events is miserable." And so much of what we flee are future shadows, things that haven't happened, or things that happened long ago and still echo as if they might return. The Stoics encouraged attention to the present, not out of obligation, but as a path to freedom. Because in the present, you are not being chased. You are just here, breathing, existing, resting. Whatever has followed you until now, whatever thought, memory, feeling, you can greet it without resistance. You're not in danger from it. You are not defined by it. It is simply part of being human, to carry things. But it is also human to set things down. You don't need to carry this into sleep. Let your mind loosen. Let the thoughts drift. You don't have to control where they go. You don't have to label them or follow them. Just let them rise and fall, like waves, like breath. The Stoics knew the most meaningful work of life was not to be found in busyness or image or avoidance, but in awareness. Gentle, unshaken awareness. The kind that lets the mind rest without needing answers. The kind that accepts what is here, without chasing what might be better. That's what stillness feels like, and it's already within you. The Stoics held a deep reverence for nature, not just the trees and seasons, but the nature of things, the nature of life. And part of that nature, they believed, was rhythm. Movement followed by stillness, effort balanced by rest. No storm rages forever, no fire burns without fuel, and no person, no matter how strong, was ever made to burn endlessly. Modern life praises the fire, the endless doing, the pushing, the stretching, the proving. But even the greatest fires must rest, or they consume everything. The Stoics would not have admired this exhaustion disguised as virtue. They would have called it an imbalance, a departure from reason and from nature. Seneca once warned that the person who tries to do everything is already failing to do anything well. The one who tries to be all things to all people loses sight of their own center. There is wisdom in knowing when to stop, not as surrender, not as failure, but as alignment with how things are meant to move. Day gives way to night, the tide rolls in and out, and the human spirit, too, was made to rise and fall. You were not built to glow constantly, like a lamp left on. You were meant to breathe, to pause, to recover your stillness, and return to yourself. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. The Stoics saw rest not as indulgence, but as a form of care for the self, which they believed was not selfish, but necessary for virtue. One who is burned out cannot be kind. One who is exhausted cannot think clearly. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself often that he was a part of nature, not separate from it. "Do not forget," he wrote, "you are made for this, to live according to nature. That includes resting when you are tired, stopping when you've gone far enough. To rest is to trust. Trust that the world does not collapse when you step back. Trust that your worth does not disappear when you are not producing something. Trust that you are enough, even when you are quiet, even when you are still, even when you are simply breathing and doing nothing more. So many people carry the fear that stopping means falling behind, that if they let themselves rest, everything they've built will unravel. But the Stoics would say, if something cannot survive your rest, then perhaps it is not worth clinging to. Perhaps it is not aligned with nature either. Perhaps it is a fire that demands too much wood. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. There is no virtue in wearing yourself down to ash, no honor in pushing past every signal your body gives. The Stoics were not strangers to effort or challenge, but they never glorified needless suffering. They taught resilience, yes, but not at the cost of reason. And reason says this: every flame, however bright, must be tended, not left to burn out. Close your eyes now, if you haven't already. Let the mind soften. You are not abandoning the world by closing the door for a while. you're returning to yourself. And the world, it will keep moving. It always does. You're allowed to step away. In their writings, the Stoics often encouraged a return to simplicity. Simplicity in thought, in possessions, in desire, but also in action. To do what is needed and no more. To give what is true and not everything. They believed the wise person knows their limit and honors it, not because they are fragile, but because they are strong enough to listen. So many have forgotten how to listen to their own exhaustion. They push it down, cover it up, fill the quiet with noise. But fatigue has a voice too. It speaks through the heaviness in your chest, through the fog in your thoughts, through the ache in your limbs, through the way your shoulders forget how to relax. All it asks is to be heard. You are not made of stone. You are not a machine. You are alive. You are nature, and nature needs rest. Tonight, you do not need to earn your stillness. It is yours by birthright. You are not useful only when working. You are not valuable only when visible. You are not good only when giving. You are allowed to be quiet, allowed to be still, allowed to be nothing but here. Let your breath settle. Let the thoughts drift. You are not missing anything. You are exactly where you should be. Marcus Aurelius would sometimes remind himself in his journal, "Don't forget how little is needed to live a good life. That includes this moment, this breath, this space of rest. There is nothing more to achieve tonight. You have done enough. Let yourself stop. Let the fire rest. Let the light dim. Tomorrow the flame may rise again. But tonight it's time to be still. You were never meant to burn without end. There comes a moment in every day when the body grows still, the world grows quiet, and something deeper within begins to stir. The Stoics understood this moment. They didn't fear the silence or fill it with distraction. They welcomed it. For in that silence, they believed the soul could return to itself. To the Stoic mind, the soul was not a separate mystical thing, but the essence of who we are when everything else falls away. Beneath the roles, the routines, the pressures, and noise. Beneath all striving and all reaction. What's left when nothing is demanded of us? This, they said, is the soul. And it needs space. It needs stillness to be felt. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself, in the privacy of his own journal, to withdraw into himself as often as possible, not as a retreat from life, but as a way of returning to clarity. People try to escape, he wrote, into the countryside, to the beach, to the mountains. But nowhere can you find a more peaceful and less busy retreat than in your own soul. He wasn't urging some grand spiritual journey. He was talking about something much simpler, the quiet within. That subtle ease that arises when we allow ourselves, for just a moment, to stop reacting, fixing, defending, planning, when we simply let go and breathe. That is the return. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. The soul, in the Stoic sense, is not tired because of how much we do. It's tired from being pulled in so many directions that it forgets where it lives. We check one more message, reply to one more thought, relive one more memory, and with each one, a small thread is pulled away from center. Eventually, we feel scattered, unmoored, as if we're never quite here, even when we try to be. But it takes only a moment of intention to return, not by doing more, but by doing less, by letting yourself be here, with this breath, this body, this quiet moment. Everything you think you need to chase can wait. Everything you fear you're falling behind on can rest. The soul is not healed through effort. It is healed through allowing. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. The Stoics didn't view rest as unproductive. They believed that when the soul is grounded, when it has returned to itself, everything else improves. Our words are kinder. Our choices are wiser. Our view is clearer. Without the haze of worry or rush, we see life as it is. Not as something to fix or control, but something to walk through gently, moment by moment. Even the great Stoic emperor, Marcus Aurelius, had to remind himself to stop, to pause, to be still. Despite all his responsibilities, he knew that being constantly outward-facing dulled his clarity, that without time to return inward, he'd lose touch with what mattered most. His advice, still relevant now. Know where you can go is more peaceful, more free from interruptions than your own soul. To return inward is not selfish. It is not abandonment. It is coming home. And home does not demand explanations. It does not ask for progress. It simply holds you. Right now, your thoughts may still be circling, trying to find conclusions, tying loose ends, playing out conversations that never happened. But that's not the soul. That's just the dust stirred up from a long day. Let it settle. Let the mind slow its rhythm. Let your breath be the guide. In and out. In and out. Each one softening the edges. Each one loosening the grip. The Stoics believed that a well-lived life was not about chasing more, but about needing less. And this too applies to rest. You don't need a perfect setting, or complete control, or a blank slate to feel peace. You only need to stop chasing and start listening. The soul is always there, beneath the surface, waiting patiently. It doesn't need fixing. It doesn't need shaping. It just wants to be felt again. It wants to be remembered. And when it is, there's nothing else you need to do. No one else you need to impress. No race you need to win. The most peaceful thing in the world is not some distant mountaintop or remote beach. It is the quiet sense that you are no longer pulled in every direction, that you've returned to yourself and nothing is missing. So rest, not because you've earned it, not because you're escaping, but because your soul, like the earth, like the sea, like the stars, needs rhythm. It needs night to balance day, stillness to balance movement. Even now, as you listen, your soul may already be softening its edges, stepping forward, not loudly, not with fanfare, but with familiarity. It's not a stranger, it's you, the part of you that always knows what matters, that always remembers what is real. And what's real right now is this breath, this warmth, this stillness. Let yourself rest here. Let your soul come home. There is so much in this life that we cannot command. The wind changes direction without asking. The rain falls on our plans. The world turns, as it always has, indifferent to what we had hoped it would be. The Stoics were clear-eyed about this. Fate, they believed, governs much of what happens. The weather, the circumstances, the events that unfold around us, these are not in our hands. But what is in our hands, always, is how we meet what comes. That's the part that belongs to us. The Stoics called it the discipline of ascent, the ability to pause, to see clearly, and to choose our inner response rather than be swept away by impulse. If the sky darkens, we cannot tell the clouds to leave, but we can draw our cloak tighter. If the day brings disappointment, we may not be able to change what happened, but we can decide not to be hardened by it. This, they said, is freedom. Not freedom from events, but freedom within them. You have power over your mind, Marcus Aurelius wrote, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That strength isn't loud. It doesn't look like victory. It often feels like softness, like choosing calm over reactivity, like choosing stillness over struggle, like choosing to rest when the world wants you to clench. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. The Stoics didn't expect themselves to be unfeeling. They weren't made of stone. They acknowledged sorrow, frustration, fear. But they believed we can feel without being ruled by our feelings. That even as the wind pushes us, we can find our footing again, and again, and again. They taught that nature will do what nature does. Trees will fall, storms will come, other people will act as they choose. But none of this robs us of our ability to meet each moment with grace. The outer world is unpredictable. The inner world can be steady. This is why rest is not weakness in their eyes. It is the act of returning to ourselves, of setting down the burdens that never belonged to us in the first place. The need to fix everything, to please everyone, to carry every outcome as if it's ours to control. There is deep peace in remembering what is not your responsibility. The world may swirl, but you are not the storm. The moment may sting, but you are not the pain. You are the one who watches, the one who breathes, the one who chooses how to walk forward, or how to pause and let the wind pass before you take the next step. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. Often, we mistake control for peace. We think that if we can just manage every detail, predict every turn, we'll finally be able to rest. But the Stoics saw clearly, trying to control what is not ours only leads to exhaustion, like trying to hold back the tide with our bare hands. Real rest begins when we stop resisting what is outside our reach. This doesn't mean we give up. It means we choose where to place our energy. Not in the weather, but in our shelter. Not in the outcome, but in the effort. Not in the world's noise, but in our response. And sometimes the wisest response is to rest, to let the day be what it was, to let the world carry on without asking for your attention tonight, to allow your heart to soften, your body to sink, your mind to return to that quiet place the Stoics knew well, where peace is not the absence of trouble, but the refusal to be broken by it. Fate may send rain, but you are not made of paper. You are allowed to exhale now. The work of carrying everything is not your burden tonight. The things that happened today, they don't have to follow you into sleep. The thoughts circling in your mind can settle. They don't need answers. They just need room to drift and dissolve. The Stoics knew that even a turbulent world couldn't shake a calm soul. That strength wasn't in resistance, but in alignment. In meeting life not with tension, but with a quiet nod. This is the weather, they would say. And this is my response. So whatever the weather of your life has been lately, whether heavy or light, stormy or still, know that you are not defined by it. You are not the forecast. You are the sky beneath it, deep, constant, untouched. And when you rest tonight, you are not ignoring the world. You are remembering your place in it, not as its ruler, not as its victim, but as one who can bend without breaking, who can accept without retreating, who can choose rest, even when everything else feels uncertain. Let your breath guide you there. Let your response be stillness. Let your response be peace. It's easy to imagine the Stoic as someone hard and untouchable, a figure of silence and steel, always composed, always above it all. But that's never what the Stoics themselves described. They weren't trying to become statues. They were trying to live wisely, within the limits of being human. And part of that humanity, part of that wisdom, was the exhale. Even the Stoic exhales. Even Marcus Aurelius, emperor and philosopher, burdened with the weight of a crumbling empire and his own restless mind, paused to remind himself, now is the time to rest, to return to the breath, to be at home in the present moment. He didn't try to crush his emotions into silence. He listened to them, questioned them, and let them pass through him. The point was never to be unfeeling. The point was to be free. Freedom often looks like release, a loosening of what's clenched, a sigh after holding in too much for too long. The Stoic didn't run from effort or responsibility, but neither did he worship them. He didn't wear exhaustion like a badge. He knew that relentless striving without pause leads not to strength, but to collapse. You don't need to hold so tightly anymore. The Stoics spoke of eupatheia, the state of well-ordered emotions. Not no emotion, not constant control, but balance, tranquility, a calm that flows from knowing what's truly yours to carry and what can be set down. Rest wasn't something they had to earn, it was something they understood as part of living in harmony with nature. Just as the body needs sleep, the soul needs quiet. There's a kind of courage in resting, in allowing yourself to stop, in choosing not to grip everything with tense hands. Life will always offer more to do, more to solve, more to fix. But not all of it is yours. Not all of it is necessary. The Stoic learns this over time, learns to look gently at his day and say, this was enough, and then to exhale. It's a kind of honesty too, to admit that the mind is tired, that the heart needs stillness. That discipline doesn't mean pushing through forever, it means knowing when to pause and when to soften. A wise man does not conquer the world every day. Some days he simply returns to himself. Let the noise of the world fade for a while. Even Epictetus, who taught in spare rooms with nothing of his own, reminded his students not to be hard on themselves. Don't demand that things happen as you wish, he said, but wish for them to happen as they do. This, too, is rest, letting go of the fight against what is, letting life be life, letting the body sleep, letting the mind drift, letting the soul, at long last, breathe. Sometimes the most stoic thing you can do is close your eyes, not to escape, but to return, not to deny the world, but to remember your place in it, small, finite, precious, a part of the whole, not the engine that drives it. You were never meant to carry everything, just to carry yourself well, and even that means knowing when to stop. Rest is not retreat, it's renewal. The Stoics lived by the rhythm of nature. They noticed the sun rise and fall, the seasons come and go, the tides ebb and return. Nothing in nature moves constantly. Everything that lasts learns how to pause. The earth itself rests. So should we. You are not falling behind by resting. You are not being weak for feeling tired. You are simply human, choosing, in this moment, to do what the body and the spirit have always known how to do. To stop, to breathe, to be still. Even the Stoic exhales. So if your day felt heavy, it's okay. You do not have to explain that weight to anyone. If your thoughts are tangled, you don't need to untie them all tonight. If your heart feels sore from trying, let it rest without judgment. You do not need to earn rest with productivity. You do not need to justify it with fatigue. You are allowed to rest simply because you are here. This moment is quiet. Let it be. Let the next breath come more gently. Let your shoulders lower. Let your mind soften. You have done enough. You are enough. Tonight, the Stoic is not the one who resists sleep. The Stoic is the one who welcomes it, who knows that even the wisest need time to turn inward. Even the strongest need time to repair. That calm is not the opposite of strength. It's where strength comes from. So let yourself lie down. Let yourself release the weight of the day. And as you do, know this. Even the Stoic exhales. And you can too.